In this video, I'm going to give you everything you need to know about FPL's new Assistant Manager chip, including what it is, why it's the most powerful chip in FPL right now, and the different ways that you can maximize it to beat your mates in your mini leagues and to gain rank by the end of the season. Throughout today's video, I'm going to be dropping little facts that will help you gain the edge over all of your rivals and anyone who doesn't watch this video. Right then, so by now you've probably heard of the Assistant Manager chip, but just in case you haven't, I'm going to give myself 10 seconds to remind you, starting now. The Assistant Manager is a chip that enables you to add a manager from any Premier League team to start scoring you points for 3 consecutive game weeks. The chip itself can only be used once this season, and it's available from game week 24 onwards. The chip itself has a few key rules that I wouldn't want you to get caught out on, so jot these down if you have the chance. Number 1, of course, is that it lasts 3 game weeks, and once it's been played, you can't cancel it. Number 2, you can't use it alongside any other chips. That includes free hit, bench boost, triple captain, or wildcard. Once you've activated this chip, you can't use any other chips through the entire period this chip is active. Number 3, managers cost money. You need to make sure that you've got money available to buy a manager when you activate the chip. Managers cost anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5 million depending on team strength, and managers themselves will not change price. Number 4, once your chip is active, you are able to transfer managers each game week. The only catch here is that it costs a transfer that you could otherwise use on a player. This is a really important point that I'm going to dwell on quite a lot more later on in the video, so don't miss out on that. Number 5, if a manager is sacked or suspended, it makes absolutely no difference. Effectively, it's the team that gets you the points, not the manager in reality. Number 6, and don't get caught out on this one, managers also count towards your maximum of 3 players in any given team. So if you're tripled up on Liverpool, you can't then go and get Arne Slot. Managers themselves, as I've just mentioned, are split into 4 different price points, ranging from the most expensive being 1.5 million all the way down to the cheapest, which is 0.5. Examples of 0.5 million managers include the promoted sides, but also, interestingly, managers like Moyes at Everton or Potter at West Ham. Managers who cost 1.5 million tend to be in stronger teams who often win matches, but of course come at a premium price. One really important thing to note here, the difference between the most expensive and the cheapest managers is only 1 million, which isn't really a big gap. In my view, that makes pricing for managers pretty much irrelevant. But why? That's because the upside you can get from potentially spending 1 million extra for a manager is far greater than the average upside you'll get from spending 1 million extra on almost any other position in your FPL team. Don't worry about that for now though, we have all the data to back that up later in the video. So by this point, we know the rules, we know the prices, but how do managers actually score points? So to put it in FPL terms, the chip earns points based on your chosen manager's club performance. So it's really all about the team, not the manager themselves. They earn points from a number of different ways, but you cannot captain them. That's also probably quite obvious. The team win is 6 points, 3 points for a draw, and of course you don't get anything for a loss, but you do get points for each goal scored, so 1 per goal in any given game week. You also get 2 points from a clean sheet, and importantly, you get something called table bonus. Now, the table bonus means if you back a manager who's playing another team 5 places or more ahead of them in the Premier League at the start of the game week, you get far greater points for anything that they do positively. So if they get a win, they get 10 extra points on top of the 6 points they get for a win normally. And the same goes for a draw. They get 5 extra points on top of the 3 that you'd get from picking any other standard manager. That means if you pick a manager who can get table bonus, the upside on just getting the win is 16 points plus any goals, any clean sheets, or even for a draw, you could get 8 points plus any clean sheets, any goals. There are 3 key takeaways that I want to focus on here. Number 1, even from a draw, you can actually outscore a regular manager if you've got the table bonus attached. Number 2 is the upside on this chip, especially in double game weeks, is absolutely huge. Now, historically, bench boost, free hit or triple captain are all really good chips for a double game week, but Assistant Manager could blow them all out of the water, which of course I'll explain in just a moment's time. In fact, the only chip that you can use defensively in terms of blank game weeks is probably the free hit. So you're looking at 3 different chips that are best used in double game weeks: Assistant Manager, Bench Boost, and Triple Captain, with Assistant Manager on average showing by far the most upside. My third key takeaway is that table bonus is going to be a huge swing factor in how you want to maximize the upside for this chip. With these 3 key takeaways in mind, there are 2 fundamental ways that you might want to play the chip. So the first strategy would be using it defensively. Now that would be to play it on top managers who win and score goals more consistently, but of course there's a little bit less upside there because you don't get the table bonus attached. Of course they are far more consistent, so we'll use Slot as an example. Has a double game week in game week 24 against Everton and Bournemouth, both away, and then a good fixture in game week 25 as well. You might want to swap out to another manager ahead of Man City in game week 26, but for argument's sake, let's say Slot and Liverpool win each of those 4 games across 3 game weeks, 3-0 each, which is quite generous, but that would mean that they score 11 points per game week. That's 6 points for the win, 3 points for the goals, 1 per goal, and 2 extra points for the clean sheet as well. Times that across 4 games across 3 game weeks, and you come to 44 points, which is a huge amount of points for a chip to gain. However, you can still get far, far greater than that if you used it in a more aggressive way. We'll come on to that in just a minute's time, but before we wrap up the defensive usage section, it's important to remember that I've played this out as if everything goes perfectly for the manager you pick. They win every single game, they don't concede any goals, and they score quite a few each time as well. So more realistically, I would say that Slot will probably win 2, possibly 3 of those 4 games. So we're maybe looking at somewhere in the range of 25 to 35 points on average. Of course, the maximum upside is something like 50 points if absolutely everything went his way. This type of strategy is going to be much more appealing to FPL managers who are already at a good rank or winning their mini leagues, and they want someone who's more of a steady Eddie pick, going to consistently get decent points with less of an upside, but also less of a negative variance as well. Strategy number 2 is much more for the managers who are chasing rank or in more of a maverick mood. Now that is to go for managers who are up against teams that are 5 or more places above them in the league, and therefore they get the potential for table bonus if they won the games. There's much higher upside here if you get it right, but of course there's much more of a potential here for complete calamity and wasting the chip altogether. On screen you'll see a great graphic from Rob T FPL who shows the standard deviation across a more safe pick on the left hand side and a more maverick pick on the right hand side across the last few seasons in FPL. As you can see, the upside is potentially higher if you go more aggressive, but there's also much more of an example of it going completely the other direction and really badly. On the left-hand side, it's more consistent, lower upside, lower downside generally. On the right-hand side, there's a much bigger upside, but also a really bad version of events could go down as well. In terms of strategies, it's relatively simple. If you want to use it in a more defensive way, then of course you're going to pick managers who have a great streak of easier fixtures, potentially even at home, where you back them to win and you also back them to score a number of goals and potentially even keep clean sheets. It's not going to work perfectly, but there are a number of examples of managers in good teams playing weaker opponents for a few game weeks in a row later on in the season that I'll get to later on in the video. For the more aggressive strategy, you want to pick managers who of course are applicable for table bonus against the opponents that you've got them up against, but especially teams that are playing at home as often as possible, but also when the lower manager is coming into a good patch of form with his team. The other option is when the teams that they're going up against have very little to play for. Now, towards the end of the season, there will be a number of mid-table clubs who are, in inverted commas, on the beach, that lower teams fighting around the relegation zone might be able to capitalise against those kinds of opponents. However, finding a run of 3 perfect games for either of these strategies is going to be near impossible. That's why I mentioned earlier on in the video that having transfers spare to use during the Assistant Manager Chip on switching managers is going to be an absolute cheat code. So where do we expect the highest points on the Assistant Manager to be scored? Well, there's a fantastic graphic again from Rob.T FPL showing all of the highest scores from 1 game week at a time across the last 8 FPL seasons. As you can see on the graphic, I think the top 12 have all been from double game weeks. So straight up, you definitely want to be playing the Assistant Manager Chip during a double game week or through a double game week wherever possible. Secondly, table bonus has been applied to all of the top 4 highest scores if you look back at the last 8 seasons if the Assistant Manager Chip had existed. That gave them huge upside, and in each of their cases scored 30 plus points in 1 game week alone. And remember, this chip is active for 3 game weeks. So if you can get that in just 1 game week, it's possible to keep going and maybe get upwards of 60, even 70 points if you're really fortunate. It's important to note though that just going after table bonus and double game weeks isn't the only way to score great points. As you can see on the graph, you've also got Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, who all did really well across a double game week without getting table bonus in a lot of the cases. You've also got a few non-double game week situations where clubs did really well and also scored big. So it's not just about the double game weeks, but it is definitely a very important factor. So why do I think it's the most powerful chip? Well, I think that graphic goes a long way to proving it, but just in case you don't believe me, let's compare it to some of the other chips. Now, free hit is first up. The way you would calculate the benefit of a free hit isn't just the score you get that game week, it's also how you did versus what your team would have originally scored. Now, more often than not, it's going to be at most a 20, maybe 30 point gap. I'm sure there are examples out there where it was a 40 point, maybe even 50 point benefit, but that still doesn't come close to the potential upside of the Assistant Manager Chip. The important thing with free hit is it can actually go the other way, and I've seen plenty of cases where you actually lose points by playing your free hit rather than actually gaining it versus what your original team might have scored. Bench boosters next up. Now obviously it's pretty difficult to get negative points unless you get red cards for all of your players on the bench, but importantly the bench boost again isn't your total 15, it's more about the players that were going to be on your bench anyway and the extra benefit you get from those players that game week. More often than not, anecdotally, if I get 20 plus points on a bench boost, I'm really happy about it. If I get 30 plus, I'm jumping for joy. So again, it's not a chip that has more upside than the Assistant Manager, and therefore I wouldn't prioritize it over the Assistant Manager chip in double game weeks. Finally, we have Triple Captain. Again, a lot like bench boost, it's pretty difficult to get negative points, and in fact, more often than not, you do get a benefit from it. However, the difference is what you would have gotten from the captain versus what you get additionally from triple captaining that player. So let's say you triple captain Mo Salah, he gets 20 points, which is fantastic. You double it to 40, again, brilliant for just a captain, but to triple captain him, you get 60 points. Now that means your benefit is not 40 extra points or 60 extra points, it's that extra 20 points you get from changing a normal captaincy to a triple captain. Again, we've seen examples where it's 30, maybe slightly more than that points over seasons gone past, but if I get more than 10, 15 points benefit from my triple captain, again, I'm really happy. Now, just a reminder, we've seen examples of 1 week of using the Assistant Manager chip score 40 plus points. It won't happen every week, but even if you get 10 or 15 points per week across a 3 game week stretch for the Assistant Manager chip, you're outscoring almost all of those chips in 99% of the cases. All of that being said, this is why using this chip correctly could make or break your FPL season. Right then, so let's wrap up by looking at where we might want to use the chip, both offensively or defensively, going into Game Week 24 through to the end of the season. Now, first up, the number one opportunity is going to be Game Week 24, where Liverpool and Everton have double game weeks. Now, of course, you can't activate before that, so you have to start it off in Game Week 24, which runs then through to Game Week 26. Now, it's fairly obvious, if you want to use it defensively or pragmatically, you start off with Liverpool. They've got a decent chance of winning both of their double game week fixtures against Everton and Bournemouth, although Bournemouth will be tricky, of course, followed by Wolves at home, which could be a good fixture for potential goals and a clean sheet. Obviously, after that, it's not ideal, and it's against Man City away from home, where they won't get table bonus, and it will be trickier to win the game than it would be, say, against a Southampton or a Leicester. So you might want to use a free transfer to move off of slot and look at attacking another fixture in Game Week 26 itself. In terms of Everton, that's more for the Mavericks out there. Of course, they've got a lower chance of winning all of the games, but Leicester at home is a good opportunity for at least a couple goals, maybe a clean sheet, and of course, a win. You won't be getting table bonus for that one though, so do look out for that. Liverpool, of course, at home is going to be difficult, but if they did pull off an upset, even if it was a draw, the upside there could be really decent. Followed by Crystal Palace and Man United. Both of those fixtures could, by this point in time, be up for table bonus, and it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if they got results in either of those games. So David Moyes at Everton might not be a bad way of playing it in Game Week 24. In terms of later on in the season, there are two other key opportunities where you might want to play it. Game Week 33 is another double game week that looks likely to be announced, based off of the fixtures that get postponed in Game Week 30. Later on, Game Week 36 will be the other double game week, with fixtures from Game Week 34 getting added to Game Week 36. Game Week 33 in particular is going to be really interesting because Game Week 34 is going to be a blank, so the ideal time to use the chip for this period of time will be Game Week 31 through to Game Week 33, so you don't have to worry about your team getting a blank game week in the Game Week 34 fixture. If you wanted to use the chip defensively, you could look at Arsenal or Liverpool as good examples in this period of time, both of which have good fixtures that you'd expect wins in, but also a few goals and maybe clean sheets as well, of course, if they get the double game weeks in Game Week 33. If you wanted to use it more offensively, teams like Man United or Spurs might be really interesting by this point in time. They're ranked a bit lower in the league right now. They might be higher up by this point in time, so watch out for that. But if the games were to be played today, they get table bonus against a number of these opponents. Because they're still decent sides, it wouldn't be shocking if they pulled off something against any of these teams. Of course, it all depends on whether they get double game weeks in Game Week 33. That final period, though, is probably my favourite. Game Week 36 should be a pretty big double game week, and towards the end of the season, you'll get a number of teams that are ranked a little bit higher in the league, that are maybe on the beach with not much to play for, and also you'll have a number of teams fighting around the relegation zone, looking to scrap wins together wherever at all possible. This is where upsets can really start occurring, and I do fancy the chances of a few big results for the Assistant Manager chip around this period in time. If you wanted to use it later on, you've also got the advantage of knowing whether or not you need to chase or be a bit more defensive in your chip usage, because you'll know exactly how many points you need to get to either the rank you want to or to beat your mini league rivals. In terms of the different types of teams you could be targeting around there, it's hard to tell right now because we don't know the double game weeks, but if Man City were to get a double game week in Game Week 36, they've got a great run from 35 through to 37 where you're expecting goals and potential clean sheets there, so that's one defensive usage. Or you could use transfers from Game Week 36 to 38 to hop on whichever team you fancy for a win in any given game week without worrying about the table bonus. So teams like Arsenal, Liverpool, Newcastle, Man City all have good fixtures scattered within that period in time, and you could use your free transfers to get to each one of those and maximize the upside without worrying about table bonus. Most managers will also have a little bit extra budget towards the end of the season, just because squad value tends to go upwards towards the end of the year, meaning you'll have a little bit more to play with and you'll be less worried about using the Assistant Manager chip at the detriment of your starting 11. In terms of a couple of offensive ways that you could play the chip potentially at this period in the season. Again, it's pretty hard to tell, and we don't know which teams will be scrapping it out around the relegation zone at that point in time, but teams like Palace, West Ham and Ipswich all have fixtures that could have table bonus attached, and all might be scrapping around towards the lower half of the league with plenty to play for, and up against teams that might not have too much to play for come this period in the season. Therefore, I really like the chances of playing it later on, around about game week 36, where I can make an informed decision on whether I need to be a bit more defensive and pragmatic with my chip usage, or I can go on the attack, swing for the fences, and go after some of those lower ranked teams that could pull off a few upsets against teams that, quite frankly, don't have a lot to play for. So there you have it, everything you need to know about the Assistant Manager chip. I wasn't too excited about it when it first launched, but I have to admit, I'm starting to really look forward to using it. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future FPL advice. See you next time.